My brother slammed me so hard. I heard the crack before I felt the pain. It was sharp, deep, like something inside my chest had just snapped. I staggered backward, hit the kitchen counter, and slid to the floor, clutching my side. And my mother, she didn't scream. She didn't rush to help me. She leaned in close, her voice low enough for only me to hear, and whispered, "Stay quiet. Kyle has a future." That was it. No, "Are you okay?" No call an ambulance, just a command to protect him. I could barely breathe, but I managed to stand. I didn't shout. I didn't fight. I walked out of that $1,000,000 kitchen, the smell of expensive wine and my mother's beef Wellingtons still in the air, and closed the door behind me. What they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that this was the last time I'd ever play by their rules. My name is Stephanie. I'm 25 years old, a newly licensed doctor. On paper, my life looks impressive: white coat, framed degree, and a job offer in my hometown of Oak Ridge, Michigan. It's the kind of resume that makes parents beam with pride. Except mine never did not for me. Anyway, I grew up in a house where appearances were everything. We were the Harris family, the ones in the glossy charity gala photos, the smiling faces in the church pew every Sunday. My father, Thomas, built a real estate empire from nothing. My mother, Natalie, was the queen of every local committee and charity board. And Kyle, 3 years older, was the golden boy who could do no wrong. From the outside, we were the picture of small-town success. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. Kyle had a temper even as a kid. If I beat him at a board game, my dollhouse might get smashed the next day. If he got a bad grade, he'd tear my homework in half just to see me cry. My parents brushed it off every time. "He's just passionate," my mother would say. "Boys will be boys," my father would add. And when he got older, they upgraded the excuse. "He's under a lot of pressure. You need to be more understanding." I learned young that in our family, Kyle's feelings always came first. When I left for medical school, I thought maybe things would change. Distance made it easier to believe the stories I told myself, that they loved me, that they were proud, that the favoritism wasn't as bad as I remembered. And when a job opened up back home, I took it. The pay was good, the loan forgiveness program was tempting, and deep down, I still had this stupid, stubborn hope that maybe, finally, my parents would see me as more than a supporting character in Kyle's life. That night, the night Kyle broke my ribs, was supposed to be a celebration. His celebration. He'd just been promoted to vice president of operations at my father's company. My mother spent days planning the dinner, cooking his favorite meal, decorating the dining room with banners. I picked up an expensive bottle of his favorite whiskey, even though it meant stretching my budget for the month. I told myself this time would be different. It wasn't. If you've ever been told to keep it in the family, you know how heavy those words can feel. They're not about keeping peace. They're about control, about making sure the image stays polished, even if it means ignoring the cracks underneath. So before I go any further, if you've ever been in that position, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you believe no one's future should come at the cost of your dignity, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. I read them all, and your stories matter. Because what happened next, it's the reason I'm telling you mine. From the moment I walked into that dining room, I could feel the script unfolding. My father beamed at Kyle, giving a toast about how his son was following in his footsteps. My mother refilled his glass every time it got low. I sat there smiling, congratulating him, keeping my voice light even though each word tasted like chalk. I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping the peace. I'd learned to measure my tone, to smooth my edges, to avoid any spark that could set him off. But it turned out, I didn't need to light the match. He was already holding one. And all it took was me mentioning a harmless conversation with his girlfriend to send him into a spiral. One moment, he was smirking at my father's toast. The next, he was glaring at me like I'd just betrayed him in front of the whole table. His voice got louder, his words sharper. My parents looked down at their plates, pretending not to hear. And when I laughed just a tiny, incredulous laugh at how absurd his accusation was, he snapped. I remember the sound of the chair legs scraping across the floor as he stood. I remember the flash of his hand, the shove, the edge of the granite counter digging into my back, the way my breath vanished all at once, replaced by a stabbing heat in my ribs. I remember my mother's eyes cold, calculating before she leaned in with that whisper, "Stay quiet. Kyle has a future." And I remember thinking, so do I. But my version of future didn't involve playing the family's silent, disposable pawn anymore. This was going to end. Not tonight. Not in the middle of their perfect dinner party. But soon. And they would never see it coming. It's funny how you don't see the cage until you try to leave it. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, population 15,000, it never felt like a small town. Not because of size, but because of control. Everyone knew everything. Or at least, they thought they did. Reputation wasn't just social currency, it was survival. And my family. We were the Harris name that everyone recognized. The polished, picture-perfect kind. We lived in the historic district, a white colonial house with black shutters, a wraparound porch, and a driveway long enough to fit 7 cars. My dad's company developed most of the commercial real estate in town strip malls, luxury condos, office parks. His name was on plaques, community boards, Little League uniforms. And my mother. She was the type who could host a fundraiser, lead the garden club, and plan the church gala, all without breaking a sweat or a smile. To outsiders, we looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, but inside that house, Kyle was king. My brother was 3 years older, loud, magnetic, effortlessly praised. When he got a C in algebra, my parents treated it like a victory. When I brought home straight A's, they barely looked up. He smashed my dolls when we were kids, punched holes in doors as a teenager, and once threw a remote at my face when I was 15. It left a bruise for a week. And they always had a reason to excuse it. He didn't mean it. You provoked him. He's just intense. You know how boys are. Every time it was my job to absorb it, to shrink, apologize, get over it. So I did what I was taught. I stopped reacting. I stopped drawing. I stopped asking questions. I became the quiet achiever, the dependable daughter, the good one. Even when I was accepted into the University of Michigan pre-med program with a partial scholarship, my parents acted like it was expected. There was no dinner, no congratulations card. Meanwhile, when Kyle got into Michigan State after my dad made a sizable donation to their business school, they threw him a full-blown party and invited half the neighborhood. It hurt, but I buried it, like always. I told myself it didn't matter, that if I just kept being good, being useful, being quiet, maybe eventually they'd see me. Maybe they'd love me the way they loved him. Spoiler alert, they didn't. I spent 8 years away from home, undergrad, med school, then a 2-year residency in Chicago. That distance, it was a breath of fresh air. I saw a therapist for the first time, called her a stress coach when I mentioned it to my mom. I started recognizing the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, the pattern of protecting Kyle no matter what he did. I started seeing myself clearly, for once. But debt has a way of pulling you back into bad situations. I'd racked up over $200,000 in student loans. And when a position opened at a private clinic back in Oak Ridge with competitive pay and a loan forgiveness program, I took it. It made sense, financially, but I'd be lying if I said that was the only reason. Some part of me, probably the most broken part, still wanted to believe we could fix things, that coming back as a full-fledged doctor, with a white coat and title after my name, would finally shift the scales. That maybe they'd be proud of me. That maybe Kyle had grown up, changed. I was wrong. 3 months ago, I moved back into a modest one-bedroom apartment not far from the clinic. I didn't want to move into the family home, though my mother offered. I needed space, boundaries, a fresh start. At first, things seemed okay. Surface-level pleasantries. My parents invited me over for Sunday dinners, and Kyle would sometimes show up, bragging about work or talking over me. I learned to nod, smile, sip my wine, old habits. But then came that night, the dinner celebrating Kyle's promotion to Vice President of Operations at Harris Development. My mother treated it like a royal coronation. She spent 2 days preparing beef Wellington, handmade pastries, and place cards for the table. She lit candles and set out her best china. It was a full production, as if Martha Stewart herself were coming. I arrived early to help, bringing a bottle of Kyle's favorite whiskey, stretching my budget just to show good faith. I chopped salad in the kitchen while my mom flitted around like she was hosting the governor. Everything was about Kyle, his success, his future. And I let it happen. Again, I kept thinking, if I just show up and be supportive, maybe they'll see I belong too. Dinner started with a toast. My father, glass raised, beamed at Kyle. To my son, the future of Harris Development, may you carry the torch even higher. They all clinked glasses. I did too. Smiled. Even. I forced myself to say, the company's lucky to have you. Kyle. I meant it. I really did. Then things shifted. Subtly at first. Kyle had already had 2 whiskeys by the time we sat down. He started talking about Megan, his girlfriend of 6 months. We're thinking of moving in together, he announced. My mother's jaw tightened. She wasn't a fan of premarital anything, but she nodded politely. She seems lovely, I said, meaning it. I ran into her at the grocery store last week. She mentioned something about your dad's boat needing repairs before the lake trip. Kyle froze. When did you talk to Megan? His tone snapped sharp. I blinked, caught off guard. Just briefly. Last week. It wasn't. What else did she say? He was glaring now, his voice rising. I tried to explain it was small talk. Nothing serious, but he wasn't hearing me. She's always talking about my family, making comments. Now she's telling you stuff behind my back. I shook my head. Kyle, it wasn't like that. Of course you'd say that. You've always been jealous. I nearly laughed, stunned, jealous of him. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. For now. Because I knew where this was going. And it was only a matter of time before he snapped. Again. It always started the same way, with Kyle feeling cornered by something small. A joke, a look, a comment that wasn't meant to be anything. And then suddenly, I was attacking him, or trying to undermine him, or jealous. Always jealous. That was his favorite word when he didn't want to be questioned. So when I mentioned Megan, he turned ice cold. You need to stop talking to my girlfriend, he snapped, slamming his whiskey glass on the table. I blinked. What? You heard me? Stay out of my relationship. I wasn't Kyle. It was literally a grocery store conversation. I didn't say anything bad. She said you asked about the lake house. I didn't. She brought it up. She was making small talk. Then maybe she should stop running her mouth, he muttered. Silence. My mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My father's eyes dropped to his plate like it had just become the most fascinating thing in the room. And I sat there, frozen. Megan had said nothing wrong. She was kind, polite. But Kyle was spiraling, and no one at the table dared say anything. Except me. Okay, this is getting out of hand, I said, trying to stay calm. You're twisting something innocent into something it wasn't. Don't tell me what I'm doing, he snapped. You think you know everything just because you're a doctor now? You've always thought you were better than me. That line hit like a slap. Better than him. I'd spent my whole life trying to catch up to the bar that kept moving every time I got close. Are you serious? I asked, keeping my voice level. You've always been the one they worship. I had to fight for every scrap of attention in this family. Oh, here we go, he said, standing. Stephanie, the victim. Stephanie, the forgotten genius. Poor little perfect doctor. He was yelling now. You want to know why they don't celebrate you? Because you're cold. You're fake. You act like you're better than everyone because you read anatomy textbooks instead of learning how to actually connect with people. I stood up too. My hands were shaking, but I refused to back down. You're drunk. I'm honest. You're unstable. That was the match. Before I could take a step back, he shoved me. Hard. I wasn't expecting it. I lost my balance, slammed sideways into the granite kitchen island. The pain shot through me instantly sharp, deep, white-hot. I gasped, then collapsed to the floor, clutching my side. I couldn't breathe. Everything after that moved in slow motion. My mother screamed. My father stood frozen for a second too long. And Kyle? He just stared down at me. She fell, he said, already rewriting the story. She slipped. I tried to speak, but the pain in my ribs made it impossible. Every breath felt like a blade between my lungs. My mother knelt beside me, her tone already shifting into crisis control. Can you sit up, honey? It's probably just bruised. She needs a hospital, my father said tightly. No, that'll create questions, my mother said under her breath. I could hear them already debating strategy like this was a PR issue instead of a medical emergency. Stephanie, my mom whispered, bending closer. Don't say anything yet. Kyle didn't mean it. That phrase again. He didn't mean it. As if that somehow changed the fact that I was lying on the floor, unable to stand. Somehow, I forced myself upright with her help. I managed to say 4 words, broken and breathless. He pushed me, hard. Her expression flickered fear, then calculation. I'm sure it was an accident, she said quickly. He's been under stress. My father looked between us, jaw tight. Let's not overreact. Overreact! I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was a doctor. I knew what a broken rib felt like. The deep ache, the pressure, the stabbing pain with every breath. It was textbook. But instead of concern, they gave me silence. Minimization. Management. I need to go, I said through gritted teeth. I'll drive myself. I'll come with you, my mom offered. No. I didn't want her near me. Not after that whisper. Not after that choice. So I left, clutching my side, barely able to breathe. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other bracing my ribs, praying I wouldn't hit a red light I couldn't sit through. I didn't go to the ER that night. I should have. But I was still hoping, still questioning, still wondering if maybe I was overreacting, just like they said. So I propped myself up in my recliner, took pain meds from my kit, and tried to sleep sitting up. I didn't sleep. The pain got worse. By morning, it was undeniable. The bruise had spread, deep purple, yellow edges, blooming like a warning. I couldn't lift my arm without crying out. I could barely inhale. Every breath scraped like glass. I texted my clinic supervisor to cancel my morning shift. Then I picked up my phone and called a doctor I'd only met once before, Dr. Laura Hayes. She was older, direct, and didn't take crap from anyone. I told her I needed an emergency appointment. She said to come in at 2. And just like that, the truth was finally going to leave the family. By the way, if you're still here listening, thank you. This isn't easy to talk about, but if any part of this feels familiar, if you've ever been told to stay quiet for the good of the family, you're not alone. And you're not crazy. Drop a comment. I read every single one. That morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mom. Dad. Then Mom again. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready. Not to lie. Not to play along. Not to tell the story they wanted me to tell. When I finally picked up, it was my mother. Her voice was soft, controlled. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just sweet, pleasant, like she was calling to ask if I needed more almond milk. "I'm in a lot of pain," I said, my voice hoarse. "I can barely move." She sighed. "These things always feel worse the next day. Just take some Advil. Ice it." Like I'd sprained a wrist, not broken ribs. "I think my ribs are fractured." Silence. Then that voice soothing but sharp underneath. "Let's not blow this out of proportion. Stephanie, Kyle feels terrible. Has he said that I asked? Has he even called?" He was very upset last night, but we need to move forward, not dwell on what can't be changed. That's what they always wanted, quiet girls and clean carpets. No mess, no questions. I didn't respond. "I know it hurts," she continued, "but we have to protect the family. Your father's business, Kyle's future. These things matter." I took a breath, flinching as pain clawed through my chest. "And I don't—" "You know that's not what I mean," she snapped, then softened. "Just think about what you're doing. If you go to a hospital, there'll be questions. It'll be on record." Then came the text. Half an hour later. "A gift basket, delivered to my door. Painkillers, a heating pad, bath salts, chocolate truffles I used to like when I was a teenager." The card read, "Rest and recover. Family always comes first. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at it for a long time, and something in me cracked. It wasn't the ribs this time. It was deeper, older, something that had been splintering inside me for years. And now, it finally broke. Because that gift wasn't care. It was containment, a bribe with bubble wrap and lavender oil. They didn't want me to get better. They wanted me to shut up. At 2:00 p.m., I walked into Dr. Hayes' clinic. The receptionist took one look at me, moving slow, stiff, hunched over, and called her back immediately. When Dr. Hayes entered the exam room, she didn't waste time. She looked me in the eye and said, "Stephanie, what happened?" I froze. There it was, the moment, the line I could choose not to cross. I could lie, say I fell, say I slipped, say nothing. But I didn't. "I was pushed," I said, quietly. She paused. "By whom?" "My brother." She didn't flinch. "Okay," she said. "Let's take a look." Her exam was clinical, focused but kind. She didn't react to the angry bruise spreading over my ribs. She just noted it, checked my breathing, listened carefully. After the x-ray, she returned with a clipboard, her face serious. "You have 3 fractured ribs. One is displaced slightly, which is likely why you're short of breath. If you hadn't come in today, there's a chance it could have caused a collapsed lung." I nodded. I didn't have the words to respond. She put the chart down and looked at me directly. "Stephanie, I'm a mandatory reporter. What you've described is domestic violence. I am legally obligated to file a report." My heart pounded. What happens now?" "I file. The police may contact you. You'll have the option to press charges. Based on your injuries, they may pursue it even if you don't. There will be documentation either way." I stared at my hands. "I know this is terrifying," she added, gently, "but I need to ask, are you safe at home?" "I'm staying with a friend." She nodded. "Good." Then, just when I thought the air couldn't get heavier, she said something I'll never forget. "When I was your age, my father broke my arm. My mother begged me to say I fell down the stairs. I did. And 2 years later, he put her in the hospital. Concussion. Broken jaw." I looked up. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. Just steady, clear. I've spent 30 years wondering if I could have stopped that from happening, if I'd said something sooner. Her words hit me like a freight train. Because I wasn't just covering for Kyle anymore. I was opening the door for him to hurt someone else. Megan, a future wife. Maybe one day. Kids. I took a deep breath, shallow and painful, and nodded. Okay, do what you need to do. She squeezed my hand. You're making the right call. Not the easy one, but the right one. That night, I stayed at Melanie's house, curled up on her couch, surrounded by heating pads and borrowed blankets. She made tea, let me cry. And I began to think, for the first time, not just about survival, but about strategy. I was done surviving. It was time to fight back. But not with yelling, not with fists. With truth, with documentation, with timing, with every tool they thought I was too fragile or too loyal to use. I was a doctor, a woman, a professional, and I was done being quiet. You know that moment when everything flips. When you stop asking for justice and start preparing to build your own. That was me lying on Melanie's couch, ribs taped, pain meds kicking in, crafting a plan. Not for revenge, not in the way movies show it. This wasn't about fury. This was about clarity. Cold, steady, methodical. Because for the first time in my life, I had nothing left to lose and everything to expose. The police contacted me the next morning. Not with sirens, not with drama. Just a polite call, asking to confirm the medical report Dr. Hayes had submitted. I said yes. I told the truth. It was clinical, controlled. I used language that couldn't be twisted. No emotion, no speculation, just facts. Kyle shoved me. I hit the counter. I sustained 3 rib fractures. It was not the first time he'd been physically aggressive. That was all they needed to open an official case. The next day, they went to his office. Let me repeat that, they didn't call him. They didn't send a warning. They walked into Harris Development, into my father's gleaming glass building, and asked to speak with Kyle Harris. In front of his coworkers. In front of his assistant. In front of the entire legacy he'd been groomed to inherit. It was the first public crack in the family image. And they hadn't even reached the second layer yet. My phone exploded within an hour. Dad, what the hell have you done? Mom, Kyle is devastated. His coworkers saw. His boss saw. Kyle. Thanks for nothing. Hope you're happy. I didn't reply. Instead, I emailed my supervisor at the clinic and told her I'd be using my medical leave to recover not just physically, but legally. She was kind, supportive, said, take all the time I needed. I hadn't expected that. I had braced for gossip, for judgment. But sometimes when you tell the truth, people actually believe you. Not always, but sometimes. And those people became my quiet army. Melanie helped me install a security camera at my apartment door. We changed the locks, just in case. I opened a new bank account, one that had no ties to my parents. I hired a lawyer not to sue. Not yet, but to understand my rights. What I was entitled to. What they couldn't legally take from me. Because my parents hadn't just cut emotional support. They froze my tuition assistance, threatened to pull their name from my loan co-signatures, said I was forcing their hand. Their attorney even sent a letter. If I didn't retract my statement to the police, I'd be cut off from the family trust, publicly disowned, and labeled emotionally unstable to anyone who asked. But I didn't flinch, because I knew what they were doing. They were setting fire to the bridge behind me, hoping I'd turn around and beg. But I wasn't going back. Meanwhile, Kyle tried to get ahead of the narrative. He went online passive-aggressive Facebook posts about betrayal and false accusations. He shared photos of us as kids, writing captions like, "Not everything is what it seems." He cornered mutual friends, told them I was mentally unwell, that I was jealous of his success. He even started a rumor that I had faked the injury to tank his promotion. But none of that mattered. Because I had documentation, X-rays, medical reports, therapist notes, timeline logs, and more importantly, I had restraint. I didn't lash out. I didn't defend myself publicly. I just waited. Let them spin, let them spiral, while I quietly built something stronger than defense. I built proof. Then came the invitation. My parents wanted a conversation. A family sit-down. They proposed neutral ground. A counselor present. I said yes. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted them to say it out loud. To admit what they'd done, and to show them calmly, professionally, that I was no longer theirs to manage. We met in a beige office with tissue boxes on every table. My mother wore pearls. My father wore a suit. Kyle showed up last, all performative regret and hollow eyes. The therapist set the ground rules. No yelling, no denial of someone else's experience. I spoke first. I want acknowledgement. Not for the first time in my life, but for the last. I want you to say it. Kyle hurt me. You tried to cover it up. And when I wouldn't go along, you tried to punish me for telling the truth. They blinked, squirmed. My mom said it was a misunderstanding. My dad said I overreacted. Kyle said he was sorry things got out of hand. I smiled, softly. No, you're sorry it cost you something. Then I stood up. This isn't a request for apology. It's a warning. I won't be quiet. I won't be erased. I won't protect people who hurt me. And then I walked out. Didn't slam the door. Didn't cry. Just left. That meeting wasn't closure. It was documentation. The final piece in a long pattern. I didn't need their change. I didn't want their permission. I already had everything I needed. And soon, so would the court. Because the DA had picked up the case, they were moving forward with charges. And for the first time in Kyle's life, someone was holding him accountable. Not because I screamed, but because I finally stopped whispering. The thing about telling the truth is, it doesn't explode. It echoes. At first, it's just a shift, the kind people notice but don't speak on. Then it spreads. Suddenly, the whispers begin not about me, but about them. About Kyle. About my father. About what everyone saw but no one said. It started at his office. The promotion he had celebrated so loudly, put on hold. People talked. HR got involved. There were ongoing internal reviews. And my father, who used to carry Kyle like a trophy, stopped mentioning him at all in public. His name vanished from the website homepage. His LinkedIn stayed quiet. And the clients, they noticed, business doesn't like bad press. And Oak Ridge, despite its glossy charm, runs on reputation. At home, my mother clung harder to the performance. She posted throwback photos. She sent carefully worded holiday emails. She told relatives I was going through a difficult time and needed space. But people could tell. The silence was too loud. And then came the actual tangible consequences. Kyle was formally charged with misdemeanor domestic assault. He pleaded not guilty, of course insisted it was a misunderstanding, an accident, an overreaction. But the medical report was clear. The X-rays didn't lie. Neither did the documented bruises, or the police interviews, or the text messages they subpoenaed where Kyle told me, "You're going to regret this." No amount of family spin could bury that. Still, they tried. A week after the arraignment, my parents showed up uninvited at my apartment. I didn't let them in. We spoke in the hallway. My mother cried, said she didn't understand how it had come to this. My father stood there, stiff, like he was waiting for a negotiation to begin. "I want to fix this," she said. "No," I told her, "you want to reset it. There's a difference." "You're destroying your own family," my father snapped. No, I said quietly. I'm finally walking out of the one that destroyed me. They didn't call again after that. Kyle, though he couldn't let it go. He tried everything: guilt, denial, pity. He sent one message that said, I hope you're proud. You've ruined my life. But I hadn't ruined anything. I had just stopped covering for it. And while his life was unraveling slowly, painfully, publicly mine was doing something strange.
It was getting quieter.
And better. I returned to work. I was greeted with cautious support. A few awkward glances. Yes, but also something I didn't expect. Respect. From nurses, from other physicians, from patients who'd heard whispers and pulled me aside with quiet nods of solidarity. One older woman, a domestic violence survivor, gripped my hand and said, You have no idea how many of us are watching. And cheering. Dr. Hayes became more than my doctor. She became my mentor. We started working together on a domestic violence awareness initiative, training local medical staff on how to recognize non-obvious signs of abuse. It felt like purpose. Like all the pain, the silence, the years of minimizing, had finally led somewhere useful. And then there was Aunt Barbara, my mother's estranged younger sister. She called me out of the blue one evening. I heard, she said simply, I believe you. Turns out, she had her own reasons for cutting ties with my family. Years ago, she'd spoken up about the way Kyle treated me at a family barbecue, pushing me into a lawn chair, hard enough to scrape my legs when I beat him at a game. She told my parents it wasn't normal. They told her she was jealous and interfering. She hadn't been invited back since. Now she was back in my life. And for the first time, I had an adult in the family who didn't want me to stay small. Megan, Kyle's girlfriend, left him. Quietly. No post. No big scene. Just one day, gone. I heard later from a mutual acquaintance that she'd read the report, that the police had tried to contact her, that she never called them back, but she did change her number and move out. Good for her. I hope she heals faster than I did. I started painting again. Nothing big, just watercolors at night, abstract, messy, healing. One of them ended up on the wall in the DV support group I started attending. The group meant everything. It was a room full of people who understood what it meant to be gaslit, minimized, pressured into silence. No one there needed proof. They just believed you. One woman, Ruth, said something that stuck with me. It doesn't matter how old you are, or how bad it was. When you finally speak the truth, it's like your bones start to knit back together the right way. She looked me dead in the eye. And you walk like someone who finally knows where they're going. And maybe I do? No more tiptoeing. No more translating rage into quiet smiles. No more decorating trauma with holiday garland. I'm not who I was 6 months ago. And neither is my family. They're still trying to preserve the old version of us taped together with charity events and fake smiles. But I'm already living the new one. And even with the scars, even with everything I lost, it feels real. It feels earned. I used to think healing looked like going back to who I was before the hurt. Now I know better. Healing isn't about returning to the past. It's about building something new on top of the ashes, something stronger, something honest. And sometimes it's quiet. Not cinematic, not thunderous. Just a moment when you breathe easier, when your hands stop shaking, when your voice doesn't catch in your throat. That's when you know it's working. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. Not the silence I broke. Not the family I walked away from. Not even the pain that forced me to grow. Because here's the thing. No one tells you when you finally name the abuse, when you stop protecting the people who hurt you, there's a cost.
You lose people.
You lose illusions. But what you gain? Self-respect. Peace. Clarity. And those things are worth everything. People always ask me, how did you find the courage? And the answer is, I didn't start with courage. I started with pain. Then I got tired. Then I got angry. And then one day, I just didn't want to carry their shame anymore. So I set it down, step by step, word by word. I wrote the affidavit. I told the truth. I faced the courtroom. I looked my abuser in the eye and said, "No more." And somewhere in that process, courage found me. Now, I work with survivors. We don't tell people how to heal. We just sit with them while they figure it out. Some are loud, some are quiet. Some go back to their families. Others never speak to them again. All of them are valid. Because healing isn't linear. It doesn't have to look heroic. Sometimes it's just getting through one more Tuesday without spiraling. Sometimes it's finally throwing away the gift your abuser gave you. Sometimes it's learning how to rest without guilt. Whatever it looks like, it's enough. As for Kyle, I don't check on him anymore. I don't need to. He doesn't get to live in my head rent-free. I have taken back that space for me, for joy, for new things. Like painting. Like my tiny apartment filled with secondhand books and soft lamps. Like the playlist I made called Not Yours Anymore. That's mine now. I won't pretend everything's perfect. I still get flashes of his voice, of my father's glare, of the quiet humiliation that lived in our house for decades. But now I have tools. I have a therapist. I have boundaries. I have a voice that doesn't tremble. And most importantly, I have people. Real people, not perfect, but kind. People who don't need me to perform to earn their love. People who let me exist without shrinking. So, if you've made it this far, thank you. For listening. For sitting with this story. For being open to seeing people like me not as damaged, but as rebuilding. And if this reminds you of something you've lived through, or someone you know, you're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're definitely not weak. I want to hear from you. Have you ever stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent? Have you ever walked away from the people who raised you to finally become who you are? Drop your thoughts in the comments I'll be reading. And if this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because sometimes, all it takes to start healing is knowing you're not the only one.